appreciate everybody being here today. Obviously, this is a special day for a lot of young men. You know, there's not very many people that get the opportunity to achieve a lifelong goal, and we had a group of young men today that are achieving that lifelong goal of playing Division I football. And we're especially proud of this group, not just for their accomplishments on the field, but for their commitment to academic excellence. I think this is a group, by and large, that chose Montana State for all the right reasons. It was the right fit for them off the field as well as on the field. You know, we made a big commitment, I think, in this first signing period to really focusing on the line of scrimmage. And as you see, I think as we turn to the next signing period in February, you'll see kind of more of an emphasis on the skill positions. Not so much the wide receiver position, but particularly the defensive backfield. I think we're going to probably have about 8 numbers left. However that shakes out, we do need to make sure that we sign a combo guy, a punter kicker in this next period. That's a big priority for us. We do have 2 really good players in the program. They're both going to be seniors and moving on. And so that's something that we want to make sure we kind of hedge our bets on, and we have some guys waiting in the wings. When you look at us on paper in the back end, we return everybody, but 5 of them are seniors. And so we're going to have to make sure that we do a good job of bringing young men into the program that can add value to that position, but also that are prepared and ready to step in after that group of seniors walks out the door. And so, you know, going into this period, obviously the defensive line was probably the hardest hit for graduation from us. We had those 3 starters on the defensive line, and so you see an emphasis on our defensive line. I think that'll continue to a certain degree. We've kind of targeted 3 big bodies as our goal for the next signing period. Most likely 2 of those guys will be defensive linemen. And we tried to address some issues that we have at linebacker, defensive line, offensive line, not so much through graduation, but continue to develop guys there, and then a handful of other positions. I think this class is highlighted by the 8 Montanans that we have in it. Obviously, that's, as it says in the press release, our heart and soul always has to come from the state of Montana. And I think we've done a good job of identifying young men that fit this university, our program, are fired up about the trajectory of the program. And then we kind of have an interesting group. I mean, we really sign guys from all over. We've got a good emphasis on the Northwest. We've got a couple of guys from the state of Texas, a couple of guys from California. And I think that you'll see that I-5 corridor come into play a little bit more for us in this next signing period. So with all that being said, I'll kind of talk individually about each one of these guys and then take questions at the end. So starting off with Ethan Bullock. So Ethan, interesting kid, came to our camps, kid from just down the road in Big Timber. And I remember he came during one of our playoff practices. He came on campus on an unofficial visit and kind of started walking around the field, and you're like, that's a pretty good looking dude. And BJ, being the bird dog that he is, he developed a good relationship with him and wasn't going to let him kind of, you know, slide away. And as we dug in just to find more out about this kid, I mean, I think he's a long, athletic guy. He brings a lot of value. I think really going to start him off at the tight end position, where we did lose 3 seniors. And so you can kind of see us trying to restock some of that. Played really, really well on the defensive line. He's a very athletic kid. It'll be interesting to see how he grows and develops. Like a lot of young Montana guys, big body guys, they haven't been in the weight room, you know, 8 months out of the year. They've been playing 3 sports and competing at a high level. And so we're excited to see how he develops. Coach Moody did a great job this year at Sweetgrass County High School, and we're excited to get this guy going in the program. Kind of did this alphabetically, so the next we'll turn to Marius Hosey. This was an interesting recruiting process. One of the things I will share with you is that year 1 of the early signing period, I don't think anything really changed. I think it was kind of just get your guys, get them to the finish line, then go and get your guys, get them to the finish line. This year you can see how things are starting to change. A lot more people kind of pulling kids in different directions, especially at the last minute. Coach McGee spent a lot of time on the phone with this young man over the last 24 hours, just making sure that we were holding off some guys from the Southland and some mid-major FBS programs in the Texas area. This guy's a highly productive player, 1,460 yards on 214 carries. Longer, probably a little bit taller athlete than what you see with Isaiah. Isaiah's more of a compact runner. This guy's more of an upright runner, good true speed at the top end, highly productive, and a really good program. And so we were in some battles with him, and I think Coach McGee did a great job of developing a relationship with this young man, and that led to getting him to the finish line. Next, we have Hayden Eisenhart. You'll see we've got a couple of Colorado kids in this class. That's an area where it kind of makes sense geographically for us to be. There's a presence in the Big Sky Conference, with Northern Colorado being close to the greater Denver area. Coach Reisinger, we kind of made a commitment to getting him down there a couple springs ago, and we're starting to see some traction. And, you know, a lot of times you got to take a couple kids from an area to kind of get that pipeline going. You see that happening for us in the Seattle area, and I think this is going to be an opportunity to kind of open up the Denver area. It's an area where we have a lot of alums. It's an easy flight. There's a lot of reasons why we should be taking some guys out of that area. And so very excited about Hayden. He was a all-conference two-way player, really good athletic guy. I mean, long, rangy, high motor, very intelligent. One of the things that attracted him to MSU was our engineering program. And so, again, a kid that's making the decision for all the right reasons. And as I said, I think Kyle did a great job of developing relationships with him, comes from a great family, just really excited about what he brings to the table for us. Up next, another Montanan, Alex Johnson. It's a kid, they were at our football camp back in June, got a chance to spend some really good time with him. Had a really good relationship with Coach Evans, the head coach there at Helena High, and he just kind of kept pounding the table for Alex, and I got a chance to, you know, we don't get a chance to see as many games. That's one of the things I felt like I had an advantage on the last couple of years. I saw every Bozeman Hawk game. So my son was playing, so I could go watch, and I got a chance to see a lot more of the Montana AA kids. The one game that I did go to live this year was Helena High and Bozeman, and Alex jumped out. And at that point, it was like, hey, let's kind of make a move on this kid and see what we can get done. And it was an easy decision for him. Again, a kid who wanted engineering, high academics, had followed Montana State, had been on our campus multiple times, and I think he brings a lot of versatility. They played him in a ton of positions. He played a kind of a conventional linebacker spot, rush end, drop down safety, post safety, tight end. You know, you can tell how intelligent a football player is by just how Coach Evans used him in the program. So we're excited about his future here. Up next, another homegrown kid, Ryan Lonergan. Ryan played for Coach Weshy there at Bozeman High and had a great career. I mean, started since he was a sophomore. I had a chance again to see this kid play a lot of football. Coach Weshy's been bringing the kids to the camp for the last couple of years, and that's really given us a chance to evaluate these kids up close and get a chance to get to know them on a personal level. I really feel strongly that this is the best probably prospect in the state of Montana. What I mean by that is there's some great players all throughout the state of Montana, but just in terms of his combination of length, speed, his frame, he went to camps around the Northwest at Boise State and at the University of Washington, and those were places that he went and got MVP honors. I know the tight ends coach at Boise State was, you know, when he committed to us, he sent me a text and said, you got a good one. And so I think a guy that can do a lot of things. He can step out and play in the slot and create mismatches in the seams. He shows physicality in the run game, and going to be a great Bobcat. So excited about him as well. Another Bozeman Hawk up next, Joe Olson. Joe rushed for 900 yards in 6 games. Broke his arm, that wasn't able to finish the season. Really dynamic player. Again, we had him at camp, and the thing that kind of tipped me over the edge, we kind of have this goal line challenge period that we do. And I think he was about this far off the ground with his legs driving, carrying about 4 guys into the end zone one time, and I was like, that guy's got it. And when you watch his highlight film, you see he's got that great combination that all great running backs have: balance, speed, vision. He's just got really good, a really good feel for the game. Was an excellent skier and mogul skied, and I think that kind of plays into some of that balance that we talk about with him. Really a hard guy to get down. And I think it's just a tough Montana kid. I mean, I just really like his demeanor and what he's going to bring to the table, adding value to our backfield. So that's something we're really excited about. Up next, another Colorado kid, Cole Ulster. Cole comes from Castleview High School. Again, the themes that I think you see is line of scrimmage, length, position versatility. Those are the things that we want. And I think that's where Cole kind of got our eye. Another kid that came up to camp. I think that's another thing that you see when we get a live eval. That makes a huge difference for us in the recruiting process. If we get a chance to get these guys on campus, I think it not only helps us to get to know them, but then they get to know us as well. And the other piece is, a lot of times they fall in love with Bozeman, Montana. We get them up here in June. It's a pretty good time to be here. And I think that carries over in terms of helping us in the recruiting process. And you know, Cole, guy that can play, like I said, like a drop-down safety, inside linebacker, played some tailback in high school. Excellent special teams player, really good point of contact player, and has a great feel for the game. And so I think he's a guy that could come in and help BJ in the kicking game right away and kind of work his way into our rotation at linebacker as he continues to grow. Holden Sampson, I just love this kid's demeanor. I mean, I think he's the best offensive lineman in the AA, and I think the film bears it out. I mean, he doesn't get beat. And when they need a play at Helena High for Coach Evans, they run right behind Holden. Comes from a football family. Sean, his cousin, was obviously an All-America here. And then his dad, Bob, played at Montana Tech. You know, just a really quality young man. High academic kid, wants to go into education. Both his mom and dad are teachers. He's you know, just a world-class human being, not to mention what he brings in terms of value as a football player. Football junkie, straight up technician, and that's what you want as an offensive lineman. And he's not afraid of the physical part of the game. So he's going to bring a lot to our offensive line room. I think he can play both center and guard too, and that's always a plus. Up next, Rudder Romo. So Rudder's kind of an interesting kid, originally from Alaska, and went to IMG and in Bradenton, Florida, and graduated early. So he graduated at mid-year. He's going to be enrolling in this upcoming semester here at Montana State. Again, defensive line is kind of a position of need for us. He was a kid who, you know, a little bit undersized as a defensive lineman. Kind of reminds me a little bit of maybe Zach Wright coming out of high school. Really good with his hands, plays behind his hands with good pad level, can get off blocks, high motor, and again, selected Montana State not for the football part of it, but for the engineering part of it. So, you know, again, hats off to the job that we're doing on the other side of campus, drawing some really quality student athletes here. Blake Schmidt, kid from Monte Vista High School. Another guy that had Montana ties. His dad actually grew up just outside of Big Timber. He's got family ties here. His dad's a military guy. They're getting ready to retire and move back up to Montana after next year when his younger brother graduates from high school. I think this guy's probably the most game-ready guy for us in the defensive front in this particular portion of the class. Very thick lower body. Again, position versatile. They play him on his feet some, but I think he's a guy that can play 4-eye and maybe even grow into a nose for us. And so, like I said, I think he's a guy that could come in and have an impact as a freshman for us. We've had an impact freshman on the defensive line each of the last 2 years, and we're excited to see what Blake can do in terms of adding value there. Up next, a big, long receiver, and this kid is all of 6'6", and he can go get it. He's an excellent basketball player. Another Texas kid came up in July last year, kind of fell in love with it. Awesome mom and dad. I think they just felt like this would be a great place for their son to go, safe, get a great education, play a really high quality level of football. I think he was a little bit of a sleeper, quite honestly, because of the style of offense they played in high school. He was from a triple option attack in high school, and so he didn't get targeted a lot. Maybe not have the numbers that a lot of big-time receivers would have, but this kid's a big-time receiver. He can go get it. He's going to be a great red zone threat for us. He's kind of a more physically developed Mekhi Metcalf, which Mekhi was coming out of high school, but you can see that length starting to play a role for us in terms of getting some guys that can play at the X and Z positions. And so I think he's gonna be a guy to keep an eye on again as a guy that might be able to come in and play early for us. Blake Thielen at Great Falls High, you know, probably had as much to do with the resurgence of the Bison program as anybody. Just, you know, really good football player. Coach Sampson had nothing but great things to say about him. His dad originally started playing football here at Montana State back in the day. I think Dan Davies told me that he actually recruited him, so I don't know if that says how old Dan is or how old Blake's dad is. But he was extremely excited for an opportunity to be a part of this program, and will add depth and value to our quarterback room. Tanner Trafton played for Coach Feller, Fergus County High School from Lewistown. I think this guy probably went to every single camp, basketball camp, football camp, everything since he was probably about 6 years old. This guy was born and bred to be a Bobcat, and you know, everything fit with this young man. High character, excellent student, productive player, in a program that just kept getting better and better. And whatever we asked him to do, if we said, hey, we need you to come back one more time, we just have some questions about this, he'd be there and he'd put his best foot forward. He'd go compete against anybody that we were bringing in from California or Colorado and just go make plays. And so again, another long guy. He's in that 6'5" range. Great red zone target, was really productive at Fergus County High School. So we're excited about his ability to add value and depth to our receiver room. Out of Boise, in another offensive lineman out of the Boise area, Coach Miller's done a really nice job down there, Jack Varing. Jack was, you know, a highly recruited young man. Again, wanted the engineering piece that was very attractive to him, and I think that's a theme that kind of shows up consistently in this class. And this guy's long. I mean, he's a big, tall, rangy kid, that 240 body with broad shoulders. You know, a guy that's going to have to put on some weight, kind of a little bit developmental. But, you know, one of those guys that you can't take away, you can't do what he's got, which is moves his feet extremely well, rolls his hips on contact, finishes blocks, shows a little bit of attitude, and just I think he's a really good get for us in terms of combination of measurables and fit. Marcus Weir, Marcus from state champion Billings Central High School, played for Coach Stanton, and this kid's got a little edge to him. He's an interesting kid, you know, you kind of get to know him. He's kind of quiet on the phone, and then you get around him a little bit. He's got a lot of personality, really good family, great high school program, consistently produced on film. That's what I'd say about him. You know, you watch him in the state championship game against Hamilton. He's making play after play when they need it against a really good football team. And so, you know, just high motor kid. You know, we're in a battle with him to get him, and he just, you know, I think that the fit just felt right for him, and I think he really connected with Coach Choate and some of our guys, our young guys on the defensive line when he was on his visit. So I think that's a big time deal for us, and we're excited about that. And then we kind of move on to a couple of transfers that we have in this class. Blake Flobin. Blake's from Northern California originally, went to Archbishop Mitty High School, then went to Holy Cross. Ended up transferring back to Foothill Junior College and finished up there the last 2 years. Probably had more heat on him as a freshman or as a sophomore coming out of Foothill. Was widely recruited by the Big Sky schools. Decided to go back to Foothill. Ended up breaking his hand and missed 2.5 games. And I think that kind of slid his recruiting back a little bit. And I think we benefited from that. I think this guy is an immediate fit need for us. We needed a big body inside linebacker with Grant walking out the door. We just don't have a guy that has the girth inside that maybe Grant had at around 240 pounds. This guy he can snap his hips on you. He's got good vertical speed, 6'5" wingspan for a guy that's around 6'1", so he's got better length than you think. It's not always just how tall you are, it's how long your levers are. And so he has some value in that regard. Really smart kid, good family. I think the whole thing was getting him up here. Once he got on the trip, you could tell he was going to be a great fit here in Montana. And then lastly, Mondre Williams, who we released earlier, who is transferring to us from the University of Washington, from Tahoma High School. I actually recruited Mondre out of high school. Mondre was probably that 220, 225 range out of high school. He's about 248 right now. He's going to probably project as our boundary end outside linebacker. That gives us the ability to move some guys around with some of the graduation that we've had. And I think he's a guy that will have an immediate impact in this league, not unlike what Bryce did. And so that's kind of the group right now. You know, there's probably there's a good chance there'll be one more addition here before the end of the week, but we've got to hold off on that one. And then obviously I kind of talked a little bit about some of our objectives as we go forward. Secondary is going to be a big piece for us. Finding that kicker punter of the future is going to be a big piece for us. Quarterback, a high school quarterback is going to be a big piece for us. And so with all that being said, I'd be happy to take any questions.
How different, it seemed like last year you had so many new faces, now that you kind of have a solidified group, how different was this recruiting trail as opposed to last?
Well, I think it's probably not just last year, it's probably been, I mean, the one that I think is so much more interesting is 2 years ago where it was just like, take them all. You know, it's just, there was not a lot of, you know, it's like, don't worry about it, we know we're going to have attrition, we've got needs pretty much everywhere, and so we were probably more selective in this recruiting cycle. We were in more battles, quite honestly, in this recruiting cycle, which I think means that we're recruiting the right guys. You know, you find some diamonds in the rough. Sometimes you don't have to beat anybody to get a great player, but oftentimes great players stand out, and there's going to be other people that are pursuing them as well. And so I think we were in more fights, especially for the early signing period, which I think has changed. And so, you know, I think maybe being a little bit more selective, really honing in on meeting specific needs versus kind of the fishing net style where you're just trying to bring in as many good players as you can and then plug your holes. I mean, we're trying to address needs on the defensive line, address needs at tight end, more specific things that we're trying to address.
How did making the playoffs just kind of, you know, factor into the whole cycle? You know, the season's 2 weeks longer, but also you have the success to show. Yeah,
I think it probably affected, you know, it affected our ability to get out and recruit, and it shows you kind of how you have to be a little bit ahead of the game. We had to scramble a lot more. I mean, I think I was in 5 towns in 5 days 1 week, 6 towns in 6 days the next week, and then you're coming back for recruiting weekends, and so you're trying to make up ground, and so we're probably spending more money traveling in the early period because of the playoff run, and that made it a little bit of a rush to the end. I think the other thing about it is that I'm learning is, you know, it's not just how you manage the recruiting part, it's how you manage these kids' bodies. I mean, we were down to fumes towards the end, and really how it affects their academics too, because I think you've got to have a good plan in place for kind of managing that as well. And so I think there's a lot of things that we learned from having the opportunity not just to make the playoffs, but to go into the second round, because that extra week does impact things quite a bit.
Now going into your fourth year, do you feel like with this class, you maybe feel like it's, your team or a team with the identity that you had hoped for when you first came in?
I think it's always a work in progress. Certainly we've recruited to some physical characteristics that we put a premium on. As I said, we built this thing on the line of scrimmage, and we used to continue to see us investing in the line of scrimmage. Having long athletic guys, I think you see that's still kind of a theme for us. We've got to kind of focus on some speed athletes in this next signing period. Men that are all about Montana State, that fit what we're doing. And I think what I will say is, over time, I think what happens is you figure out the fit. You can think what you want to think when you first take a job, and you think these are the young men that are going to fit into this situation in this system. But over time, you really figure out who fits best at Montana State. And I think we've got a much better handle on that, and I think that helps us in the recruiting process.
Seems to be less of a priority on mid-year transfers right now. Is that progress in the program? Is that something that you'd hope would happen by year 4?
Yeah, and I think there's two things that go into that. Number one, that if there's one place that I know we better have the right fit, it's those bounce downs and those junior college transfers. Because that can really screw up the chemistry in your locker room. Number one, because those guys have to get honed into our culture. It's not 102 guys changing for a couple of guys. It's those guys coming in and being open and willing to fit in. And so knowing something about these kids is critically important. Josh knew a little bit about Blake Flovin, having coached at Foothill, and having really good ties there. Obviously, Amandre's a guy that I knew something about, and so I think that's a key element here. And I think you see that in a lot of programs where guys that have some familiarity with the staff, the head coach, the program, they make a better transition. And I think that's maybe what you're seeing is us being a little bit more selective in terms of who we bring in, understanding the fit, both academically and socially here in Bozeman, but also the fit in our locker room because the culture's now set.
How important is that, those ties to Washington, especially with how Stirk has fit in and your strong ties? How important is it to keep that pipeline open?
I think recruiting is always about relationships, and whether that's, you could have a kid that you recruited and he didn't sign with you, and things may not work out at University X, and all of a sudden they come and they say, you know what, Coach, I really appreciated how you handled this, and they'll come back and you'll still have had a strong relationship with them, and you may end up benefiting from that down the road. And so whether that's a relationship with a high school coach, relationship with former colleagues like I had at Washington, or relationships with kids that you recruited through the process, and maybe they didn't go to the school that you were at, but they remember how you treated them. And I think that's always the bottom line in this. Really recruiting is about two things in my mind. Number one is evaluation, and that's the lost art. You have to, and when I say evaluation, the easy thing to see is can they play the game. The hard thing to tell is that fit piece. Are they going to be the right kid for you? And that's why we always have this saying in this business is don't worry about the ones you don't get, just make sure the ones you got are the right ones. And that's the whole thing in this. So that's the first piece is that evaluation piece, and the second piece is building those relationships. And so I think our staff does a tremendous job in both facets, and I think in large part because we have identified what we're looking for, the fit that we're looking for, and then we've got guys that are really hardworking and diligent in the recruiting process.
And with Bozeman having 2 Cats and 2 Grizz, how do you see that relationship working out for those lifelong friends and teammates down the road?
Well, I don't know that, I know they're teammates, but this is a unique rivalry, right? So I think they'll, probably see each other on the holiday weekends and probably not do a whole lot else. And so, we were kind of joking about that earlier with Ryan and Joe, and, I think that's one of the awesome things about this state is you do have that unique rivalry, and these kids get a chance to dig in, and, some guys are going to go that direction, some guys are going to go this direction, and after the game they'll shake hands and hug each other and tell stories about when they were in high school together, but, it's 364 days to try to get after the guy on the other side.
Why do you think that length is so key in today's college game?
Well, I think it's because on the defensive side, and I think I've addressed this before, teams oftentimes are trying to spread you out horizontally. And so there's only 1 or 2 ways to make up that space. You either got to be faster or you got to be longer. And so if you're short and slow, that's not a good combination, right? And so what we're trying to do, I didn't mean to go directly at you, Greg, I'm sorry. And, what we're trying to do, obviously, is we're trying to make sure that if we're not playing with a bunch of speed sometimes, at least we can cover that space with the length. And whether that's defending zone read or RPOs, those are things that we're trying to keep in mind all the time. And the same thing happens on offense. Being able to gain leverage on a block for a tight end or a tackle. You may not have the fastest speed in the world, But if that step and that arm, that reach can get you in position, that's gonna be a benefit for you. And so that's why we place that premium on length.
You mentioned, you know, still wanting to pursue a high school quarterback, you know, going into February. Just kind of how did you break down the quarterback position right now?
You know, I think I really like Casey Ballman, Ruben Beltran, Tucker Rovig, and we got an ace up the sleeve. And that's number 15. He was the first team all-conference unanimous Big Sky quarterback, by the way. Let's not forget that. He's an All-American. And so if we got to go away from some traditional things and think outside the box, I think we've shown the ability to do that. But I really believe that the quarterback of the future is one of the three guys that I mentioned first. And if I didn't believe that, we would have taken a guy. And we had some guys that we were pursuing. They ended up going to FBS programs. We weren't going to just go sign a guy to sign a guy. That's, I mean, to me, we've done that, and it doesn't really work. So let's make doggone sure that we feel great about the kid. Now we can kind of go back into the recruiting cycle and you know, look for a guy. We got Blake Thielen in this class, who I think adds value. You know, if we don't take a quarterback, we still have 4 in the program. And that's, you know, obviously we'll probably try to take a quarterback, but I'm not going to take a guy because I feel really good about, you know, whether that's Travis Johnson lining up in the Wildcat or Troy lining up in the Wildcat, or, you know, having Isaiah on one side and Troy on the other side, and, you know, a quarterback to be named later sitting in the middle. I think all of that stuff is good for the Wildcats. I think we've increased our ability to stretch the field on the perimeter. We've got, I think, really talented running backs. We've returned 4 of our 5 starters on the offensive line. And so I think we're going to go from being kind of a younger team to being more of a veteran team next year. Even our underclassmen will have played a ton of football here. You're going to have, you know, you're going to have guys that are true seniors that have never redshirted, that have started every game. Guys like Kevin Cassis, you know, guys like Damian Washington have played a ton of football for us. And so I think Derek Marks is an example of that. So these guys they're not old guys. They're still fairly young because they never redshirted, but they played a lot of football. And now they play playoff football, and they played against, in the last 2 years, the number 2, the number 3, the number 4, and the number 5 seed in that tournament that was going on, including the 2 that are playing for the national championship. So we know what we need to do. And I think that what's going to drive us forward is not necessarily the guys in this group. There's going to be a couple guys that will sprinkle in that'll help us, but the guys that are going to make the difference for us are already in our program.
How would you evaluate the in-state battle this year? Was there any difference with Coach Choate being across the hill?
Yeah, I think, I definitely think there was. I think that they were more aggressive in going after some of the in-state guys, which we kind of predicted. I also know that they're in a different place right now in terms of how they're moving their program forward. And they probably have a little bit more money available, and or at least are projecting that perhaps based on what they think might happen on their roster. And I think that was very much the case for us a couple years ago. And so I think over time everything's going to kind of level itself out. There's, you know, it's a very unique situation where you've got a state like Montana where it's not very population rich, and you've got 2 Division I football programs that really rely on a lot of their best players coming from this state because of what it means to the player. Not what it says on the stopwatch or not what it says on the bench press number, but what it says, you know, on the bottom line, which is they're all proud to be Montanans. And so I think that's an element that'll always play into this rivalry, and I think it's just been enhanced by Coach Choate being there.
Does Chris Murray have a chance to come back?
You know, honestly, I know he's reapplied for admission. What his academic standing is going to be determined through this semester, really. It wasn't what he had to do last semester, it's what he has to do this semester to get back into good academic standing, and I think he knows what he needs to do, and he's moving forward really on his own to get that done.
For your wide receiver core, I mean, you didn't have guys that were 6'6", 6'5" this year. Was that the length, that type of body you wanted to add on to that receiver?
Well, we have some guys like that. Mekhi Metcalf redshirted. You know, Travis is a big, long guy. Lance McCutcheon is a long guy. I think, again, it comes back to what we were talking about. When you throw those 50-50 balls up, a guy might be covered, but if he can out-jump you, he's really not covered. And so I think that, you know, we kind of put a premium on some of that because we feel like, number one, those guys in the red zone are such a matchup problem. And number 2, if you can put them in the seam and in the slot and they can get matched up on a linebacker or a safety, again, they become a matchup problem. And quite honestly, with what we do, they better be able to block on the perimeter. And bigger guys usually do a little bit better job of that. And so all of those things play into kind of you seeing us go a little bit bigger at the receiver position.
I guess just to follow up, with Troy, do you have an idea of where he might be, you know, kind of heading?
Everywhere. He's omnipresent. No, I mean, you know, I'm going to get asked that question 1,000 times, and I get that. He's got to touch the football. He has to. I mean, he was good for one 40-yard run a game at least, you know, and I think he's just got to touch the football somehow, some way. And what that means, I don't know exactly. I just know he's a very unique talent and very, very special player, and that I think we could probably, you know, play him in multiple spots. But he has the biggest impact on the game, I think, when he's touching the football.
There's a presence from Texas in this recruiting class. How much does Janarius play into that, and how authentic is that pitch and his backstory?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, number one, you know, he's got great reputation down there. You know, won a 6A state championship as a quarterback. He's got a lot of connections and ties. Has former teammates that are in that area that can give him good intel and good information when he walks in the door. Even if the high school coach doesn't know him directly, they know him. And I think that helps. And then when he sits down with a young man and their family and it says, hey, I came from here and this was my experience at Montana State, clearly that's an added bonus for us.
Looking at these, you know, graphics and the social media stuff, you know, how do you think you've maybe seen recruiting change over the years with social media, with these
A lot,
graphics?
yeah. I think that means I'm getting old. No, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of these kids, it'll be like, hey, you'll know what they're into. Because some of them, what do they want? They want, send me another graphic, you know, and that's what they want. Or blessed to have received, you know, the first thing that's going to happen when they get offers, it's going to go out on social media of some kind. And so it's very interesting. You can actually garner, I think, a lot of information about their personality if you pay attention to what they do on social media. And not so much what they retweet or whatever, but it's like, is it about drawing attention to themselves? Is it, what are they really into? But I do think that branding is really what this is. You know, this is what we're doing, is we're putting a brand out there, and I think we're fortunate to have, in my mind, best in the FCS and Garrett and his staff in terms of building a brand. I mean, I had guys that were, you know, checking out what we were putting out on social media today, and they were like, you guys' graphics are on point, you know, they're really good. And so, you know, hats off to Garrett and his crew, and I love it because I'll go back there in the dungeon, and they'll be back there looking at what Alabama's doing, and hey, check out what Ohio State's got. They're just as competitive in this area as we are in the recruiting, and I think you need that. You need guys that get it like that want to be the best at what they do, regardless of whether that's, you know, going out and signing the best class they can sign or propping things up. And so I think we're very fortunate to have that.
I'm curious, I saw somewhere that, you know, some recruits are sending their letters of intent by taking a picture of it with their phone and texting it. Do you still do the fax? Or?
No, that's actually what the first thing that you said is standard operating procedure now. I mean, it's pretty much take a picture, flip it over, take a picture, text it to your coach, then we have our compliance people certify it, make sure everything's good, and then we can release their names.
Do you have a plan as far as filling that last coaching spot?
I do have a plan.
I figured.
Yeah, we're in the process of working that plan right now, and so, you know, we've put together kind of an internal committee. The job was, I think, officially posted yesterday. I think it's got to be posted for 7 days, and then we'll kind of move forward with the interview process. I think, you know, obviously we've reached out to some guys, engaged some interest, and I think we'll have somebody in place right after the first of the year.
Capitol High, Boise, the Colorado area, San Diego, those are all places that are new recruiting grounds for you guys in some senses. Was that a goal to get into some of those new areas, and how much has that impacted the recruiting in the future?
Well, you know, the Colorado thing I think was very much by design. You know, it's like one of the things I think you have to do at a place like Bozeman. Let me explain this. Like when you're recruiting in the Southeast Conference, for example, most of the kids that you're going to recruit can drive to your campus. They're going to be within a 3.5 hour drive of your campus. And so it makes it so much easier to get ahead of the recruiting process. You're not having to fly them in. You're not having to wait for the official visits. They're on your campus 3 to 5 times unofficially, whether that's at camps, junior days, driving down to see a ball game. You're around them a lot. And so one of the things that we don't have an advantage on is that. I mean, you think about it. I mean, if we sign a kid from Lewistown, that's the same distance that somebody's driving from Tallahassee down to Gainesville. So, you know, it's a little bit different deal in that regard. And so what we've got to do is we've got to look at, okay, where do we have direct flights? You know, we connect through Salt Lake, we connect through Denver, Minneapolis. We've been trying to kind of make some inroads. One of the things that does hurt us a little bit against the Missouri Valley is cost of attendance. And you know, I know that's a priority for us here, and hopefully we can make some inroads on that. And you know, that's kind of what you're dealing with. And you go west, Seattle, Portland, obviously, direct flights. We're getting more and more down to California, and so we've started to try to identify those areas where it's easier to get to Bozeman, and because we are a fairly isolated place. And we really had the same challenge in Boise. I think it's was the most remote community, over 200,000 in the country or something. I mean, it's a 5-hour drive to the next community of its size. And so you have to be able to target areas where you can get kids on campus.
I have a question about Helena High. Is just, you get 3 kids from that program. What did you like about the development of that program, and can you speak to the relationship you have with their head coach?
Yeah, I think, Tony was, longtime head coach there and had done a great job. Really the first guy that we got in my time here, was Chase. And Chase, I mean, let me say this, if there's a young man that has maximized his college experience any better than Chase Benson has, I don't know who it is. And not to get into a lot of details, but this kid doesn't come from a whole lot, and he's overcome a lot. He had a 3.7 GPA this semester, and that's exceptional, and just extremely proud of him. And if you watch the film against NDSU, he's playing pretty good. And so I think Chase's success really did kind of help us and our reputation and within that school, because I think the teachers, everybody loved Chase, but they knew Chase, was going to need some support. And I think the way that we've supported that young man has kind of resonated with the people back at Helena High. Certainly my relationship with Coach Evans, I've known him since I was 17 years old. So, we've got a lot of history together, and I think he trusts me, and I trust him on evaluations. When he pounds the table for a kid, I'm gonna go, okay, I listen to you.
After the NDSU game, I know you talked about, the offensive and defensive lines, specifically in that game. Kind of when you look at, this class and then kind of the future of the program, just how key is, those areas?
Well, they're everything for us. I mean, you look at it, and when things get tough, what did NDSU do? Run power. And they ran it really well, and they just kind of ran over people. And that's a really demoralizing feeling when you can't stop that base run play. You can throw the kitchen sink at it, and they can still get you for 5-6 yards and then pop a 30-yard run. That's really demoralizing, and it's hard to overcome that mentally a lot of times. And so, I don't know that I certainly wouldn't presume that we're in that class right now. I think what this is about is us continuing to build and develop and put a premium on the line of scrimmage. And if we do that, over time, we'll have developed the depth, the mass, the size that we need to go compete at that elite level, that, those top 10 teams in the FCS. And I think we've closed that gap, but we've got work to do.
Do you have a thought on the championship matchup between Eastern and North Dakota State?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting matchup. I think they've really done at Eastern have done a really good job of adjusting their style on offense. I think the difference with Eastern this year is I think they're an elite defense. I think they've played much better defensive football, and that's kind of been the thing that carried them through that transition time as they were working from Gage to their new quarterback, Eric. And he's a unique talent. I mean, he's a lot like Chris Murray. You think everything's taken care of, and then all of a sudden he kind of ducks out the back door and goes for 80 on you. And so they're going to have to, North Dakota State's going to have a good plan to kind of minimize that. And I do think that Eastern, especially number 99 up front, he's as good a defensive lineman interiorly as we played against. And so, he's a guy that might be able to hold up a little bit better against the interior of their offensive line. So I think it's a good matchup. I think stylistically it's a little bit different, but I think it's a good matchup.
Going back to Greg's earlier question, and I apologize if this was already announced, but is Matt, solidified as offensive coordinator, or is that kind of still up in the air?
No, Matt will be our offensive coordinator moving forward. Okay.
As we're getting ready for the holiday season, a little bit off topic here, what are some of your favorite holiday traditions?
Gosh, my favorite holiday traditions. I don't know, opening Christmas presents on Christmas morning, I guess, I always think about this, so it's just a time to kind of catch your breath for me for the last 20 years, You get this little time off, and it's just a chance to kind of recharge. And, used to be able to go to our cabin up in Coeur d'Alene every year, and don't always get a chance to do that anymore, but I think it's just being with family, spending time with family and have an opportunity to maybe look back on the year that was and take just a few minutes to appreciate the relationships that you formed and some of the accomplishments that you might have. All right, thank you guys.
Thanks.